Okay. Post-competition and the Harvest Festival. The next day I was due to be measured and order my new outfit. Otto soon arrived, this time accompanied by Karina and her seamstresses so that they could prepare the cloth we had chosen. It was sad that I hadn't been able to secure Mom as my personal dyer, but at the very least I wanted to use that style of dress that Thule had designed for me. Lady Rosamond, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts, Karina said. The dyeing competition yesterday had apparently been a huge success. Noblewomen had started placing orders with workshops and craftspeople through their exclusive merchants, earning them high praise from not only the large stores who had feared the Gilberta Company monopolizing everything, but also from the dyeing guild, the dyeing workshops, and the craftspeople themselves. The cloth that the craftspeople had worked so hard to dye now had the approval of arch nobles, meaning the new dyeing methods were cemented into Ehrenfest culture. The craftsmen who had earned the title of Renaissance from Florencia and at Charlotte were looked upon with envy, and many burned with a passion to secure the title for themselves next time. As you did not decide upon a Renaissance, Lady Rosamond, the craftspeople have shifted their focus to next season, Karina continued. I am told that there are young craftspeople who have begun to study art on the basis of the cloth you have selected. Prior to my new techniques, dyers had focused on learning how to dye cloth a perfectly even color, tolerating no blemishes whatsoever. Now that resist dyeing was becoming more widespread, however, people were needing to work on their artistic skills as well. There are some craftspeople who use their own art, but there are others who hired art workshops to draw the flowers and such for them. Those who had wanted seamstresses apparently relied on embroidery and such to create the designs. Indeed, the field of dyeing is changing dramatically as we speak, Karina concluded. It seemed that the craftspeople were all collectively challenging the new dyeing techniques. That was nice to hear, and I certainly appreciated their efforts, but do warn the dyeing guild that single-color cloth is still going to be necessary in Ehrenfest, I said. Remind them to be wary of repeating the mistakes of those who came before us by allowing currently existing techniques to be forgotten. I wouldn't want this new trend to make everyone forget the techniques they currently use. There was no point in repeating what had happened when Gabriel of Arensbach made color dyeing trendy. I will ensure they are warned, Karina said, nodding her understanding as she busily measured me. I made sure to listen carefully as she spoke to her aides, and it was then that I realized the members were a little greater than before. In a shocking twist, I was actually growing a bit. Heck yes! I'm growing a very tiny amount over the past year. I could feel my excitement bubbling up within me, but I made sure to keep it from showing on my face. Karina gave a meaningful smile while placing the cloth that Brunhilde had selected against me. You truly have sharp eyes, Lady Rosamond, she said. The piece of cloth you selected is the one that Effa dyed. Even when no names were provided, you were able to identify her work so easily, Otto could scarcely believe it. No, it wasn't me. It really wasn't. I had narrowed it down to a few select candidates, but Brunhilde was the one who had made the final choice. Brunhilde succeeded where the strength of my love failed. Brunhilde, I kneel before your greatness. Had I known this was Mom's cloth, I would have granted her the Renaissance title. I had already announced that I hadn't selected anyone, however, and it was too late to backpedal. I was disappointed that I hadn't managed to identify it on my own, but I was still genuinely glad to be using Mom's cloth for my winter outfit. I quite liked my summer outfit and would appreciate something similar for winter, I said. Karina nodded with a knowing smile. I had already told Elvira and Florencia that I wanted to establish bubble skirts as a trend, and Charlotte had called them cute and expressed interest in having her own made, so they were pretty much set in stone. Furthermore, do instruct Thule to create a hairpin to match this outfit, as you wish. Once the measuring was done and my outfit and the hairpin were ordered, I prepared to depart for the temple. The Harvest Festival was fast approaching. Upon my return, I reported to Ferdinand what had happened during the dyeing competition. I also mentioned that I had spoken to Aurelia and wanted to make new recipes with Arensbach ingredients, at which point he began to shake his head. It is simple for you to say that you wish to make new recipes, but the chefs will struggle a great deal with your request, he began. To summarize the list of points he bombarded me with, my personal chefs wouldn't know how to handle the bizarre ingredients from Arensbach, and this inexperience was considered dangerous. Unknown ingredients were pretty much treated as explosives. I suppose that's fair enough. I seem to recall there being quite a few ingredients that needed special treatment back in my lower city days. There was the faux garlic one had to crush ahead of time, mushrooms that one had to burn to stop them from dancing. Ferdinand was right that it was unwise for the chefs to try to use these new Arensbach ingredients without knowing how to deal with their quirks. In the past, southern nobles would at times offer Arensbach ingredients to the castle so court chefs and those serving nobles of the former Veronica faction might be familiar with them, Ferdinand said, but we cannot trust Aurelia enough to simply use ingredients she has brought with her. At this rate, his lack of trust in Aurelia was going to delay my chance of eating seafood. I needed to do something, and fast. Aurelia is by no means a bad person, I said. In fact, she was so timid that she could not even remove her veil. Fool, this is why you are called narrow-minded. Or narrow-sighted. Think not just of Aurelia, but also of those around her, Ferdinand shot back. I almost wanted to cry. The fish are within my reach. They're so close I can touch them. Unless I can eat them soon, I'm literally going to die. Ferdinand, we need to research these Aaron's Buck ingredients, not just for the sake of adjusting Aurelia to Aaronfest, but also in the intent of preparing new trends. Indeed, I really want to eat fish. I'm even willing to accept it plain, grilled with nothing but salt. The more complex flavoring can come with time. I need fish now. Perhaps I could squeeze some citrus juice over the cooked fish to add some seasonal flavors. Either way, I just wanted to eat some seafood. Anything would do. I mean, all you have to do is tell Ferdinand, I want to eat something that's similar to what was back home. That's all you would have to do, because he would know instantly what you're talking about. Because, hello, he's the only person who's actually seen where you came from before you became mine. He would know that that's something that you had back home that you want to experience again. Because he knows that fish is hard to come. That fish probably wasn't eaten very often in the lower city. So, I mean, that's the only place you would have eaten it from. Ferdinand started rubbing his temples. You attempt to obfuscate your goals with lofty claims of wishing to help Aurelia and producing new trends, but you could not even finish your point before you revealed that you care only for satiating this apparent lust for food. Good grief. You truly never change. It seems as if educating you has been a complete waste of my time. Actually, your education has helped me change quite a bit. If not for your guidance, I would have barged into Aurelia's home with Hugo and Ella that very same day. We would not be having this conversation because my mouth would already be filled with fish. I was going through the appropriate procedure here. Some might have argued this was the absolute minimum expected of me, but as far as I was concerned, it showed just how far I had come. As I puffed out my chest and started bragging about my growth, however, Ferdinand scolded me and said that this was still much more for me to learn. Well, yeah, okay, that's fair. I will consult Sylvester to see whether any of the castle chefs are familiar with Aaron's Buck ingredients, Ferdinand said. You remain in the temple. I feel as though you will wander out on your own if you are not placed under supervision. You would no doubt make convenient detours while traveling between the temple and castle, tempt gourmands for their political support, and Ferdinand went on to describe all the things he thought I might do, counting them off on his fingers one by one. I could now travel between the temple and castle without him, since I had no adult noble attendants retainers with me, and it was absolutely true that I was thinking about sneaking away during one of the journeys to further my fishy agenda. He had seen right through me. Yeah, you're kind of like Sylvester. You'll do what you want without any thinking about what you put others through, essentially. You two are alike even though you're not related. That's funny. This isn't good. I'm like an open book to him. Can he read minds or something? I awkwardly glanced up at Ferdinand, who grimaced slightly in response. I simply listed the past actions of a certain archduke with escapist. I knew it! That's what he was thinking of, was Sylvester. But I see that some rang a bell for you, he said. Curse you, Sylvester! Furthermore, your thoughts are written on your face. Are you not excessively lowering your guard due to the fact we are in the temple? He was right again. I always relaxed when I was in the temple. I rubbed my cheeks and tried putting on a more noble-like expression, only for Ferdinand to let out an exasperated sigh. You seem to have forgotten this because it inconveniences you, but you are forbidden from contacting Aurelia. You were allowed to meet during the dyeing competition under Elvira's supervision, but that was an exception, if you would recall. I had completely forgotten due to our friendly conversation at the tea party, but I had indeed been told not to contact her. I couldn't see why, though. That didn't seem dangerous at all. And I really wanted some fish. I can't contact her without supervision, so I can contact her with supervision? Oh, she's gonna try and work around it. Oh my god. I slapped my cheek, straightened my back, and put on a noble smile. I would very much like to prepare offerings to Kuokokalra, the god of cooking, before all the lives of this land are blanketed in the harsh winter brought about by Abiglade, the god of life's frigid emotions. Let us satisfy cholera with offerings made by the joint wisdom of Arensbach and Ehrenfest. Lord Ferdinand, would you take the time to join us in this endeavor? If rumors spread that Aurelia is attempting to spread Arensbach cooking throughout Ehrenfest, the former Veronica faction will take it as an opportunity to leap to her side. Do not give Elvira even more work to deal with, Ferdinand said, dismissing my suggestion with a harsh glare. It seems that the fish will need to wait until the former Veronica faction settle down. And so my fish stream fades away. My fish. I fish. I spent the next few days trying again and again to convince Ferdinand, engaging in hopeless trial and error, approaching the situation from every possible angle, until an ordinance from Elvira finally interrupted my efforts. She informed me that a papermaking workshop has been established in Ruenwald, and that Wilfried had completed his final checks. Since we were only having the papermaking workshops produce the most basic form of paper, teaching them the process only took about a month. We could easily be back in time for the Harvest Festival. 4 Grey Priests from the Rosemine Workshop climbed into Leslie alongside those from the Planting Company, who needed to establish a plant paper guild. Then we headed to the province in question. The instructors were made of Grey Priests who, with experience staying in Ilgner, and Grey Priests who had socialized with the commoners in Haas. There were the Harls from the Planting Company as well, so I wouldn't need to worry. I simply needed to emphasize that the Grey Priests were not to be treated poorly or as though they were property. Aside from the trip to the papermaking workshop, I needed to select priests to swap out with those at Haas, organize winter preparations, and check over the printing industry. I was kept so busy that the Harvest Festival seemed to come around in the blink of an eye. There wasn't actually much ground for me to cover this year, since Wilfried and Charlotte were helping as well. Ferdinand said that we could just go to the same places we had gone for spring prayer, so our roles were settled without much discussion at all. On top of my Harvest Festival duties, I was also going to be visiting Groschel to fetch the Gutenbergs. Justice was not accompanying me as my tax official this year. Instead, another archnoble was taking his place. This arch scholar was Hartmut's uncle, who had also been his superior before Hartmut became my retainer. Lady Rosemine, will you be traveling by high beast, he asked. Oh, dear. It was normal for our carriages to be used when traveling with Blue Priests. The long nature of the journey and the necessity of bringing luggage meant they were essential even to nobles. The scholar seemingly wanted to confirm that high beasts were actually used in the temple. I explained that I would send my luggage and attendants ahead via carriage while we traveled by high beast. It was a system designed with my health in mind. I told the scholar that he was welcome to use a carriage, but he replied that he would rather use a high beast as well. I can't blame him. High beasts are faster and more comfortable than carriages. After a brief meeting, we were prepared to depart. Since the Harvest Festival was a religious ceremony and was being held outside of the castle, only Daniel and Angelica were accompanying me. The underage apprentices were having to stay behind. Upon being told this, Judith saw Daniel a vexed glare and grumbled about being stuck without work again. Come on, Judith, it isn't my fault this time, Daniel said, scratching his cheek. Angelica nodded in agreement. Right. Rather than envying Daniel, you should work hard so that you can serve Lady Rosemine properly when it's your turn to guard her. I should ask Master to train you while we're gone. Judith shook her head. I've already been told to improve my accuracy, so I'll focus on that instead. The last thing I needed was delegate work to be done in my absence. The apprentice knights generally spent each day working on their coordination. This doubled as training for the hunting tournament for the castle's winter preparation, which took place during the Harvest Festival. Shined so brightly that even the adult knights paled in comparison, I said, Yes, my lady, your wish is my command. Hartmut, Feline, please continue transcribing our book from Dunkelfelger. As you wish. And as for my attendance, I ask that you complete the embroidery. Lord Ferdinand is going to be looking it over when he returns from the Harvest Festival. Understood. As I continued to delegate work, my eyes fell on Brunhilde. You suggested that all girls wear hairpins at the Royal Academy's advancement ceremony and fellowship gatherings, correct? I asked. Summon the Gilberta Company and have them prepare hairpins for this year's female students at the cost of a small silver each. 1 small silver, Brunhilde repeated, her brow furrowed. Such hairpins would only be suitable for lay nobles and men nobles. They are beneath you, Lady Rosemine. I intend to wear it double with my usual hairpin, and the archnobles may mimic this. I do not want lay nobles to find themselves struggling for money because they have been forced to purchase something at my order. Brunhilde seemed to find my answer satisfactory. She began categorizing everyone's hair colors and choosing which hairpins to suit them will suit them best. So now my council retainers won't be lacking work while I'm at the Harvest Festival, right? Assigning suitable tasks to everyone is surprisingly difficult. During the Harvest Festival, I was going to be traveling by high beast with Fran and Angelica, while Monica, Hugo, Ella, and Rosina were going to be traveling by carriage. Those going to Haas's monastery were going to be guarded, as per usual, with Dad at the front. I gazed across all the gathered soldiers. I saw with my own eyes when visiting the Italian restaurant that the beauty and cleanliness of the lower city has been maintained, I said. During my meeting there, the large store owners of the Merchants Guild reported just how hard all of you soldiers have been working. You have my utmost gratitude, and the Archduke is extremely pleased with this result. I'm looking forward to hearing tales of your efforts over dinner tonight at the monastery. As you wish, it will be my pleasure, Gunter said. He rapped the left side of his chest twice with his fist, and the soldiers behind him mimicked the motion with proud grins. I returned the gesture and then watched as the carriages departed. It was afternoon when I arrived in Haas, and the harvest festival immediately began. The farmers welcomed me with jubilation, pleased that the year had given them yet another bountiful harvest. I performed the baptism, coming of age, and star-binding ceremonies while the arch scholar who had accompanied me discussed taxes and the dead with the mayor Richt. Once the ceremonies were over, it was time for the wharf tournament. The townspeople were as passionate about it as ever. I felt a little bad for the poor wharf getting kicked around, but nobody else seemed even the slightest bit bothered. Even though this was Haas's harvest festival, I decided to leave midway through as I would have done anywhere else. The tax official was still at the Winter Mansion when I made my way to the monastery. Lady Rosemine. Upon my arrival, I was greeted not only by the Grey Priest, but by the soldiers as well, who were in such a fervor that one would think alcohol was being served. I changed from my ceremonial robes to my usual robes, and then headed to the dining hall. The monastery's fields were bountiful as well. It must be because the earth is still overflowing with their mana, Thor said, gleefully showing me the vegetables he had harvested. They looked tastier and much larger than the ones I was used to from my commoner days. Rick smiled with Thor and pointed at a box in the corner of the dining hall. We prepared the best vegetables to be sent to the temple for you to eat, he said. Greens go bad easily, so they're soaked in oil or heavily salted. Well, we plan to get the root crops first thing tomorrow morning. Please do share them throughout the temple orphanage. Perhaps because they had spent so long doing farm work, the monastery's Grey Priest looked healthier and more tan than the Grey Priest who had just arrived from the Ehrenfest orphanage. It must be hard for the Grey Priest to learn Haas's ways, considering they had arrived without any farming experience, I observed. It was, but the hard work allowed us to produce such delicious vegetables, one of the Grey Priests replied. Seeing the fruits of our labor lined up before us is infinitely more joyous than sitting and waiting to be given morsels. The loss of so many blue priests had meant that food shortages were once commonplace in the Ehrenfest orphanage. Only by providing for themselves had those been living managed to avoid going hungry. The Grey Priest smiled to himself, no doubt amused by how much they had once struggled to do something that now appeared so simple. He exuded the happiness of someone who had forged a new path for themselves, and that made me happy too. After praising the Grey Priest, I walked over to the soldiers. It was a rare opportunity for me to properly speak with commoners. I paid close attention to their thrilling tales of running around the city before the Entwickeln, and they asked me about how things were faring with all the merchants from other duchies visiting. I've heard the thoughts of the planting company and the guildmaster, but I would like to know your perspectives as well, I said. Has the peace of the city been at all affected? Or have any non-merchants attempted to exploit the situation for personal gain? How has the situation seemed to you, soldiers? From a merchant's perspective, there had been a whirlwind of activities following the arrival of the outsider merchants, but the huge spike in profits more than make up for it. There was much room for improvement, but with the lower city still clean, and the Italian restaurant's introduction system proving very effective, the consensus was that things had gone successfully overall. The soldiers went right to telling me their thoughts. Prices have gone up since there are so many people buying so many things, one said, but in return we have more work and we're getting paid more. It was a bit rough before that raise got approved. It was summer, so we were able to avoid starving by gathering in the forest, but we're bound to struggle a lot more if this happens every year. The eateries and taverns were completely packed for days on end. I'd never seen so many people in the city but once. I noticed that Fran was frantically trying to write down all the soldiers' responses in his diptych. I took out my own diptych and did the same. Considering that the merchants also brought servants with them, quite a flood of people had entered the city. There were even merchants who traveled the Craftsman's Alley in the southern part of the city to see what people were making. Few were actually allowed into workshops, however, since nobody recognized them. The craftspeople said those wandering merchants were acting suspiciously. Furthermore, everyone was so busy trying to complete their orders that they weren't particularly welcoming of outsiders wanting to chat. The main street from the east gate to the west gate was constantly packed with people and more lively than it's ever been. Unfortunately, fights at eateries and taverns became a lot more common, and we were frequently called to deal with them, so the east gate in particular was very busy. Even so, overall impressions were positive. I was relieved to know that their reports weren't much different from those of the merchants. It's all thanks to your efforts that the lower city remains so clean and its residents have adjusted to their new lifestyle so well, I said. You even ensured that minor fights were the only problems of note despite so many outsider merchants flooding the city. I thank you ever so much and I look forward to your continued service. If not for your sage advice, Lady Rosemine, we would not have patrolled the city so thoroughly or put quite so much work into warning the others. Dad said it was very likely that the lower city would have ended up being Demolished entirely. Our job as soldiers is to protect the city, so please do contact us if something like this happens again, he concluded, once again tapping his chest twice in a salute. Good. Sounds like I managed to keep everyone safe. Okay, 20 minutes have gone by. Alright. Grosho and the Harvest Festival. It was a relief to know that the lower city was fine after all, but from what I can tell, it had reached its limit accommodating the merchants this year. Its current capacity wasn't enough to manage trade with any additional duchies, and there was no way we could prepare enough high-class inns and workers in time for all the new merchants who would presumably be coming in a year's time. It might be time to consider selling how to make wrench ham and hairpins. The Great Priest woke up first thing in the morning and the next day to gather vegetables from the fields for us to bring back to the temple. I ate breakfast in the meantime. Today's menu was soup and salad made with the fresh vegetables from the monastery's own produce, paired with some bacon brought in from Ehrenfest. We also had some bread, slathered with jam made from honey and viorebs, the latter of which closely resembles the black currants found on Earth. The shrine maidens here had gathered the ingredients from Haas's forest, which had then been prepared especially for my visit. The sour vioreb contrasted nicely with the sweet, thick honey, making for a truly delicious bread. The soup and jam were both delicious, I said. I'm sure we can thank the fruit and vegetables you have all grown together. The area around this monastery is brimming with your mana, so there is much more to gather in the forest, Thor said. It seemed that the land around the monastery was even richer than the land surrounding Haas's river. I poured an extra amount of mana into the chapel face stone so that they could enjoy delicious fruits next year as well. After finishing my breakfast, I saw off the carriages heading back to Ehrenfest. Inside were the Grey Priests who had switched places with new priests, and were now going back to the orphanage. Being transported along with them were the vegetables that Thor and the others had farmed, the printed books from Haas, and the monastery's budgetary documents. Dad and the soldiers lined up before me, as they now had done several times before, waiting for me to pay them and see them off as well. I imagine that disposing of one's waste is going to be quite the ordeal once the snow begins, I said, and that is precisely why I ask that you help ensure the lower city does not regress by spring. Of course, they are currently making roofs so that waste can be disposed of even when the weather worsens. From there, everyone will simply need to work together. Rest assured, we will continue keeping an eye on things. We soldiers work no matter the weather. I nodded, remembering that Dad would work even through snow. It was safe to entrust the lower city to him and the others. The soldiers saluted me. I returned the gesture, and then the carriages started on their return journey. Once the carriages had disappeared into the distance, it was time for me to go too. I still needed to head to Haas's winter mansion and check things with the tax scholar. Monica and Rosina took care of preparing them for their departure, while the Grey Priests and Shrine Maidens cleaned up from breakfast. I moved to speak to Nora while watching Hugo and Ella deliver box lunches to Fran. Nora, has the monastery finished its winter preparations? Yes, we now work in cooperation with the people of Haas. We cannot continue to rely on the planting company forever, she replied. In the past, those of the monastery had gotten through winter only with the planting company's help. Now the monastery had formed a cooperative relationship with the city of Haas by providing both money and manpower. I would need to thank Rick later and encourage this collaboration to continue. Lady Rosemine, Fran said, everything is ready. I nodded. If you'll excuse us then, Nora, I entrust the rest to all of you. The monastery is changing slowly but surely, which will no doubt trouble the new priests we have brought here from Ehrenfest. Please help them adjust to life here, while at the same time reevaluating yourselves such that you do not depart too thoroughly from temple life. Too much change will cause chaos when it is time for you to visit the Ehrenfest orphanage. Understood. I headed for Haas's winter mansion with Fran and Angelica, walking my panda bus beside the carriages that were transporting Monica and the others. I reunited with the tax official's attendants at the winter mansion, then moved to his quarters. I will be double-checking his work while traveling by high beast. Monica, let us meet later. Yes, Lady Rosemine. After watching Monica and the others go, Rick guided me around the plaza. I watched the tax official teleporting harvested crops to the castle, as was his duty. The magic circle-adorned cloth that had been put on yesterday's stage was now spread out wide. A new set of tax goods was placed atop it. The tax official touched the circle, making it light up, and then the goods disappeared. A portion of said goods was going to me. Rick, I've told the people of Haas are assisting the monastery with their winter preparations, I said. The Grey Priests were raised in the temple and know little of the world, so you are doing them a great service by providing them the tools to survive. It is nothing. They are paying for our services and allowing us to gather near the monastery, Rick replied, returning a smile that seemed to say that everyone needed to stick together. The forest around the monastery was so rich with my mana that it produced rather large fruit, which in turn attracted various animals. It was even a perfect place for hunting. I very much hope this cooperation between Haas and the monastery continues, Rick said. Indeed, as do we, I replied. We smiled at each other, and it was about then that the tax official completed his work. Lady Rosemine, let us head to the next city, he said. We flew to the next winter mansion by high beast. I performed the necessary rituals, and then we departed the next morning once the tax official was done with his work. He and I mostly spoke about this year's harvest as Hartmut as we traveled. He said that Hartmut had once been an exceedingly uncaring child, but that he was now brimming with devotion to the Saint of Arenfest. This change apparently came as both heartwarming and concerning to him. Honestly, I'm concerned too. It's scary because he's just that skilled at what he does. He even said that researching me is his life's work. Hartmut will obey his lady's orders, so please do keep a tight rein on him, the tax official had said to me. I seem to recall Audley telling me the same thing. He is quite skilled, the tax official said, so I believe he will prove quite a useful retainer to keep at your side. His mind is quite open as well. He adjusted to temple work in the blink of an eye, I replied. This news made the tax official stare at me in surprise. Hartmut, the infamously stubborn boy who changes his mind for no one, appears open-minded to you, he asked. His desire to serve you well must be compelling him to hide his true feelings. It seemed that Hartmut was far more devoted than I expected. The term religious fanatic popped into my mind for a second, but it carried such negative connotations that I quickly swallowed it back down. Maybe it's about time I reward him somehow? Hartmut had been jealous of everyone's ticks, so maybe getting a matching set for my retainers was a wise idea. I continued pondering the issue and eventually finished my part in the Central District's Harvest Festival, having collapsed and ended up bedridden only a single time. Nice! Of course, I ended up bedridden again soon after my return to the temple. I was the last one to complete my duties due to my collapsing incident. Wilfred and Charlotte had narrowly made it back in time to participate in the hunting tournament. Ferdinand, I said, I'm going to Groschel next as I recall. Contact Elvira first. You are going there not just for the Harvest Festival, but also to retrieve the Gutenbergs and observe the efficacy of their fledgling printing industry, are you not? Ferdinand asked. I clapped my hands together in realization. I had been planning to visit Groschel as the High Bishop, stay in the side building for the ceremony, and then grab the Gutenbergs and go. But I was most likely going to have to meet with the Gieb as well. Brunhilde's father was a purebred noble, and it would be a genuine problem if nobody was there to speak with him. Elvira and Brunhilde were essential for filling that role. This is Rosemine. I'm thinking of going to Groschel now that the Central District Harvest Festival is complete, I said, contacting Elvira by ordinance. Her reply came an instant later. She needed to make various preparations and wanted to bring along some scholars, so we will be leaving 3 days from now. With the date decided, I asked Brunhilde whether she would like to come with us. She was underage, but that wasn't a problem since Groschel was her home province. Ferdinand, may I bring Hartmut and Feline with me too, even though I am attending the Harvest Festival as the High Bishop, I asked. I brought them with me before so they could see the printing industry. My castle retainers didn't need to be present for religious ceremonies, but I was going to be operating as a noble and a member of the archducal family, so it was absolutely preferable to have them there. My unusual double life sure was a pain in the neck. Yes, it would be wise to bring them with you, just in case, Ferdinand replied. They may not be needed in the Central District, but we do not know what might be expected of you in Groschel. And so I decided to bring my council retainers with me. Fran, Monica, and Hugo were also going to accompany me. The noble mansion already had chefs, but I would need my own one too, assuming I was staying in the side building as the High Bishop. As promised, preparations for the ceremony were completed 3 days later, and we promptly departed for Groschel. The province was like a second Ehrenfest. Out of consideration for Gabriel of Ahrensbach, it had been given the portion of the Central District with the highest population, and a perfect location alongside the primary trade route in and out of Ehrenfest. And since the city was built to her specifications, the tiny noble's quarter was strictly separated from the commoner's lower city. There was no winter mansion in sight, and unlike in Aelgner, the Harvest Festival was held near the Archduke's estate where commoners did not gather. From the sky, it was hard to tell where the ceremony was even due to take place. I came here for spring prayer when I was an apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden, but back then, I only handed over the chalice. Not to mention, since Ferdinand had swiftly finished like customary greetings at the mansion, I had barely been even involved. Do you know where the ceremony is being held? I asked the tax official. I do not. The taxes are taken at the Gieb's mansion, so I know nothing of the ceremony. In the provinces ruled by Giebs, priests would simply take the registered metals and teleport the selected goods, since the local Gieb would do their taxes themselves. Tax officials were therefore able to complete their job without even leaving the Gieb's mansion. Having no other choice, I decided to ask upon landing once the necessary introductions had taken place. Gieb Groschel, where is the ceremony going to take place? I would ask that you take me there. This is my first time visiting this province for the Harvest Festival, I said. Unfortunately, Count Groschel didn't know either. He rubbed his chin for a moment before gesturing over an attendant and whispering something in his ear. Not long after, someone who seemed to be a lay scholar rushed in and announced that he would guide us there. Thank God someone knows. I must attend the ceremony as the High Bishop, but you all may focus on the printing industry, I said to Overlord and the others. My attendants and scholars may likewise enter the mansion, so as you need not involve yourself with the ceremony. The scholars here for the printing industry nodded and went inside, but Hartman alone asked to accompany me to the ceremony, an unmistakable sparkle in his orange eyes. I am forbidden from entering the temple chapel, Lady Rosamund, so I seldom have the opportunity to see your blessings with my own eyes. Here in Groshel, however, there is no temple for me to be denied entry to. He was so invested in the idea that I couldn't even muster the energy to turn him down. I simply gave up and allowed him to accompany Fran, Angelica, and me to the ceremony. Most nobles would do everything in their power to avoid the lower city, but he seemed excited enough that I stopped giving it any thought. My chef Hugo must be allowed to begin work, I said to the lay nobles before heading to the side building. The Gutenbergs were supposed to be living here, but the interior was completely empty. The blood drained from my face as I looked around and realized that nobody had lived here for a very long time. Where are my Gutenbergs? I asked, shooting the lay noble a sharp glare. They're living in the lower city. They asked to move there, he answered nervously. He stammered so incessantly that I struggled to understand him. But the Gutenbergs had apparently asked for quarters close to the workshop, since having to walk there every day was a waste of precious time and energy. We did not force them to move, nor have we harmed them. Very well, take me to where the ceremony is being held. Hugo began preparing food. Monica prepared the chambers to be used. The Gutenbergs may have moved to the lower city, but Fran and Monica needed to sleep here as a priest and shrine maiden respectfully. They also needed time to cook and clean. I climbed into Leslie with Angelica, Fran, and Hartman, and followed after our guide's high beast as he took us to the ceremony. Daniel took up the position of rear guard. After a short journey, we arrived at Groshel's equivalent of a central plaza. There certainly aren't many people here, are there? The Harvest Festival was normally attended by all those who wished to participate in the baptism ceremony, the coming-of-age ceremony, and the Starblind ceremony. Groshel had a larger population than the other areas we had visited, and yet only a few people were gathered. I could guess that only the participants and their families were here, which was a stark contrast to what I was used to from other places, where it seemed as though the entire city was in a festive mood. Still, thanks to there being so few people, I usually found the Gutenbergs among the crowd. They seemed to be doing okay, so all the anxiety inside of me vanished. If you would excuse me, the lay noble said. He left almost immediately after we arrived, as if he couldn't bear to remain in the lower city for a moment longer. The foul stench and general filth no doubt appalled him. Even I scratched up my face without thinking. It had been quite a while since I smelled the horrible stench of the lower city. There was no avoiding the odor, no matter how much one tried to get used to it. Hartman, stand with Angelica, I said, and do not interfere with the ceremony. May I assist Fran? Hartman asked. He gestured to Fran, who had his hands full registering the medals of the baptized children and checking those here for the coming-of-age ceremony and the Starblind ceremony. I would not dare trouble you with this, Lord Hartman, Fran replied. I am an apprentice scholar. I know how to use the medals. And as is natural for a retainer of Lady Rosamund, I spoke with Wilma and learned the processes for every ceremony, Hartman said. Now standing beside Fran. Wow, you actually talked to Wilma about all this? Okay, when did you do that? He began registering medals without the slightest hesitation, so I signaled with my eyes for Fran to let him have his fun. 2 people were faster than 1 after all. The registering and checking were progressing smoothly now that Fran was accepting Hartman's assistance, so I started reading a picture book Bible to the children. Once I finished telling the story of the gods, I offered a prayer. O Shitsaria, goddess of wind, please hear my prayer. We offer thee our thoughts, prayers, and gratitude so that thou might bless these newly born children and grant them thy divine protection. A light, the divine color of Shitsaria, shot out my ring before raining down on the children. Blessings had been a normal sight to those of the central district and me, but the same was not true for the people of Groshel. Oh, what the heck? What is this? Oh, something shining. Their reactions made me realize that this was in fact the first time I was giving a blessing in Groshel. The nearby families watched with their mouths agape as the yellow light slowly came down. Gale meanwhile stepped forward from the group of Gutenbergs and puffed out his chest. Told you, didn't I? I'm no liar. Lady Rosamund is a saint who gives real blessings, and I'm her attendant, he declared. His language was crude again. Perhaps because he had spent so much time in the province's lower city, I thought it was a heartwarming display, but Fran seemed to think otherwise. He grimaced, muttering his disbelief that Gil would identify himself as my attendant while speaking in such a manner. Rest in peace, Gil. You're going to get lectured when we get back. Either due to the awed cries of the children or Gil's loud bragging, a sizable peanut gallery began to form. By the time I had given the blessings for the coming-of-age ceremony and the Starblind ceremony, quite a large crowd was watching. With this, the Saint of Ehrenfest's legend had spread further, Hartman said, in an almost drunken look of satisfaction on his face. It seemed that he was exceedingly overjoyed to be present for this moment. I simply did not understand it. I haven't done anything particularly special, I replied. The blessings used in ceremonies like this didn't require much mana. It wasn't too much different from lighting up a ring during noble greetings. Hartman, however, shook his head. It is quite something to use one's own mana to bless commoners who are incapable of blessing one back, he said. Once again, I was finding out just how wide of a gap there was between myself and other nobles. Although the event was called the Harvest Festival, Groshel was similar to Ehrenfest's lower city in that there was no actual harvest for everyone to celebrate. There were feasts held among neighbors after the ceremony, and so the excitement faded. People gradually dispersed in groups of 2 or 3 until everyone was gone. I gestured for the Gutenbergs to approach as the crowd continued to thin. Gil was the first one to run over. "You called, Lady Rosemine?" he exclaimed. It seemed that he had not entirely forgotten how to speak properly. I decided that I would put in a good word for him if Fran actually did try and scold him, although the thought alone made me chuckle. "Please spend tonight in the side building." "I would very much like to hear about your stay here," I said. "We have carriages prepared since we knew you would be coming to the Harvest Festival," he replied. Let us go to them by high beast, then." I climbed back inside Leslie, ready to go to the places where the Gutenbergs were staying to fetch the others, but the Grey Priest refused to get inside of me. "We must cleanse ourselves and change clothes so that we are presentable enough to be seen with you, Lady Rosemine. Riding inside your high beast would simply be... they probably think they're too dirty for that." The Grey Priest had been fine with living in the lower city, but now that I was here, they couldn't help but be self-conscious. "There is not much time," I said. "I will cleanse all of you at once." I had everyone gather into one spot after putting their things into Leslie. Lutz, Gil, Zach, Johannes, Joseph, and the others looked around nervously, not sure what was about to happen. "Everyone, please hold your nose and close your eyes," I said, whipping out my staff and failing off mana. "Lady Rosemine, please know your strength," Daniel hurriedly warned me before grabbing his nose, preparing to get wrapped up in the spell, even from where he was standing behind me. The Gutenbergs followed suit upon seeing how quickly he had moved. "Washed in." This time everything seemed to go well. A wall of water appeared only around the Gutenbergs and then dispersed a few seconds later. A few began to splutter, having opened their eyes and mouths in surprise at being suddenly submerged in water, but everyone was now clean. As a bonus, the ground where the washing had touched was now spotless as well. "There we go, that should do it," I said. "Now we ride." The Gutenbergs climbed into Leslie with disconcerted face expressions. I heard Lutz mutter about that spell being what must have cleansed the lower city. "Yep, astute as always, ever Lutz." Once we were back in the side building, the Gutenbergs changed their clothes and then began speaking about where they were going to sleep tonight and such. I had Monica change me out of my ceremonial robes and into my noble robes. I could just send an ordinance to Brunhilde once I was done talking to the Gutenbergs. "How has life been here in Groshel?" I asked. They replied that it was not much different from life in Ehrenfest's lower city. They had endured very little contact with nobles, and thanks to the threatening look I had given the craftspeople of Groshel during our initial arrival, business had progressed smoothly. There were no problems in particular, Gil said. Lutz nodded. The Grey Priests were just a bit overwhelmed. The craftspeople had been fine here since they were used to living in the filth that had once been everywhere in Ehrenfest's lower city. The Grey Priests, however, had been raised in the temple, so they had found it especially challenging to adjust to the foul smells and general uncleanliness. The smell in Ilgner was not particularly bad since there were few people and waste was used for agriculture, but here it has been quite something, one of the Grey Priests said, sounding somewhat unhappy. We have grown more used to it, though. I found it a lot easier to understand the Grey Priest's thoughts and feelings now, perhaps because they had spent so long in the lower city where one needed to be more direct for others to understand them. Just as those in Haldensdale struggled, the Smiths had failed to earn Johann's approval for their letter type, Sax said. But they were close, and we discussed them staying in our workshop over the winter, Johann added. Could you acquire the Geeve's approval for this, Lady Rosemine? I gave a curt nod. It seemed that Johann had successfully formed a relationship of trust with the Smiths. His experience in Haldensdale had prompted him to speak more often, and Zack had apparently arbitrated between them. I taught the carpentry workshop how to make a printing press. They'll need to work with the smithy going forward, but there shouldn't be any problems, Ingo said. The workshop had successfully built 2 new printing presses. They had smoothly established which kinds of wood to use, how to cut them, and how to put them together. What about the ink workshop, I asked. Me, I can answer that. Heidi shot her hand up, eager to speak, but when Joseph saw that I had Hartman with me, he immediately clamped a hand over her mouth. Heidi, I'm begging you. Shut up, Joseph muttered. He then turned to me and cleared his throat. Ahem. The ink workshop had no problems producing black ink, but the colored ink we knew requires materials that cannot be gathered in this area. Instead, they had begun to experiment with ingredients local to Groshel. Thank you, Joseph. It seemed that because of the black ink they had successfully produced, the printing industry was able to proceed without a hitch. Now they simply needed to figure out what other ingredients would make the colored ink they wanted. And the paper-making workshop, I asked? It didn't go very well, Lutz said, his shoulders slumped. Gil and the Grey Priest exchanged looks, and they sighed and took out a few sheets of the paper made in Groshel. It certainly appeared to be of a lower quality than I was used to. At first glance, it looked like straw paper. Why is that, I asked. The water here is filthy. It affected the paper. In Ehrenfest, the wide river to the west of the city was pretty filthy, but the streams running through the forest were naturally clean and produced water that was suitable for papermaking. In Ilkner, the water was clean in general, probably because the province was located in the countryside. This was our first time encountering such a problem. They must either import clean water or clean their current sources, I said. Then again, I suppose this is not an issue that mere craftspeople can solve. I'll speak to Grieb Groschel. And with that, our discussion came to an end. I was looking over Hartman's notes on the meeting when I noticed Les and Gil exchanging looks. They grinned at each other and then both started walking over to me. We would like to offer you this gift, Lady Rosemine. This is a book made here in Groschel to demonstrate the printing process. It does not contain much, and it will not sell to nobles, but we believe it will suit your tastes. They had used paper from Ehrenfest, so the quality wasn't bad. It was very similar to the books I was used to, albeit contained considerably thinner. I started thumbing through it, wondering why they had said it wouldn't sell, and the contents immediately took me by surprise. I gazed up at Lutz and Gale, speechless, and saw that they were both watching me with proud smiles. By collecting stories as we establish the printing industry, we can gather tales from a variety of provinces, Lutz said. Indeed, the book was filled with stories Gil and Lutz had gathered from the craftspeople of Groschel. They certainly weren't the kind of tales that would inspire a noble to loosen their purse strings, but to me, the mastermind who had attempted to execute Operation Grimm, this book was a precious gift and a pleasant surprise. You dream of a future where even commoners are able to read books freely, no? Lutz asked with a grin. Hartman was present, so he couldn't say it outright, but I could tell that he was referring to our old conversations. Gil was standing beside him, proudly having known that I would appreciate their work. Lutz, Gil, this truly is a wonderful gift, I exclaimed, unable to hide my excitement. They knew exactly how to raise my spirits, as they had proved time and time again. We will need to charge you a small fee for the stories, but we only ask for half of what it cost us to gather them, since the planting company will one day be printing the books, Lutz said. I nodded in response. Sure, you can have as much money as you need, just bring me more stories. Okay, I'm gonna have to end this here, and I'll see y'all next time.